Hello, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I want to talk about some of my recent horror reads. I have some great books to talk about, so let's get started. First, I want to talk about Night Shoot by David Sodergren, and this is a book that I received from the author via a digital copy. And this is about a group of college students that, for their final project, decide to make a somewhat cheesy B movie that is a horror slasher. And they go to this old iconic building, and of course things go terribly wrong, as they always do with horror books. And this is a really interesting one because it basically combines one of my favorite subgenres of slasher stories with one of my least favorite subgenres, which is haunted houses, or in general haunted buildings. And it's definitely a mixture of the two. In a lot of ways, it's about this building that definitely has some history to it, and there's just weird things going on. But at the same time, the author, in his message at the end of the book, talked about the fact that he really wanted to write a slasher story because while it is so iconic in the movies, there actually isn't a lot of slasher books out there. I've read a lot of them just because it's a genre that I seek out, but compared to other subgenres of horror, there really isn't as many out there. So I do think he accomplished what he wanted to do. It's very much a well-written story. I want to call it fun, but compared to a lot of slasher stories, I think this one has a lot more depth. He is an excellent writer, the descriptions were vivid, and it maybe wasn't as lighthearted as I expected, but if you're looking for a serious horror book that is going to blend some genres together and do it really well, this is a really good one to check out. Again, the haunted building aspect didn't quite work for me, but that's my personal taste. Overall, I thought it was very well done, I was very pleased, and will definitely be checking out more by this author. Next, I want to talk about 5 Midnights by Ann Dávila Cardinal, and this is a book that I received from NetGalley, from Torteen, and it follows a group of teenagers in Puerto Rico that end up encountering a possible monster that seems to stem from Puerto Rican myth. And it was very much a unique story. This is considered to be young adult horror, but honestly, I do think that it will appeal to a wider audience. The age of the protagonists definitely fall within that YA genre, but otherwise I really felt like it avoided a lot of the tropes. There is a little bit of romance in it, but it's very mild and does not supersede the horror and other aspects of this story. If anything, I would say that it's more of a coming of age story, which is often more something you read when you're older because it's more reflecting on their youth. It's very much a character story, which would probably be the reason that I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I wanted it to be a little more entertaining than it was, but I'd say it focuses on characters over plot. However, the reason I was so excited to pick it up, and I'm still really excited to talk about it, is the fact that it is a fantastic example of diverse horror. This is written by an author who is of Puerto Rican descent. I don't know if she lived in that country, but regardless, she is giving a really authentic experience. It is considered to be own voices, and Puerto Rico really just shone on the page. I do not have much background in that Latino country. I really didn't know much about it, but the author weaves in food and language and so many other aspects of that culture that I really felt like I went away knowing a lot more about it. And it was just very interesting. It definitely added a layer to the story that elevated it, and I would definitely recommend it. So even if you don't read young adult, this is one that does cross over. And if you're looking for more diversity in your horror, or just simply looking for a horror book that is different, this is a great one to pick up. It's a newer release and is definitely worth your time. Next, I read Children of the Dark by Jonathan Janz, and this is a book that is about a group of young boys that are very obsessed with serial killers, and they find out right at the beginning of the story that a serial killer in their area has gotten out and is coming their way. The story particularly focuses on one young boy who has an abusive, drug-addicted mother, and because of that, he is forced to take care of his younger sister himself and take on a lot more responsibility than he should. There's some things that I really liked about this book. I personally am a sucker for the bad abusive parent trope. I do not get tired of reading about children that have to take on more responsibility than they should and take care of younger siblings. It's something I love in stories and very much enjoyed in this one. It's a story that is very much focused on the characters and is very much a coming of age story. And I think that people who really like coming of age horror will adore this book. It's actually not my favorite subgenre. I'm coming to realize that while I like watching it in movies and TV shows, it doesn't always work for me on the page. But if you really like stories in the vein of Stranger Things, this is a great one to pick up. There's lots of boy humor, especially I think male readers will really get a lot out of this story. It's my first time reading Jonathan Janz, and while it wasn't a total hit out of the park for me, I'm still very much interested in reading more of his work. If I had one main complaint, is that I did find the writing a little bit clunky in this one. I've heard that his writing is much stronger in other books, so this just might be the case of having needed a better editor, because I just found the wording a little bit awkward in places, especially because the book is so conversation heavy. But regardless, it was still enjoyable to read. I will definitely check out more by this author and would love to hear your recommendations what Jonathan Janz book I should read next. Now I want to talk about The Devil Crept In by Anya Albarn, and this is one that I listened to as an audiobook. This follows a young boy whose best friend has gone missing. As well, there's a second narrative about a woman struggling with infertility, trying to conceive a child. And within the story, there's a focus on this forest that's near the community, because you realize that there's some kind of supernatural presence possibly happening where when people go into the forest and come out, they seem to be different. And that premise definitely is reminiscent of Pet Sematary. I almost hate to make that comparison though, because I think it unfairly made me expect this book to be more like that, and it's really hard for any book to live up to that perfection. Regardless, there is a lot of really good things happening in this one. It's very character focused, and I thought the ending was actually quite good. I really got pulled into the story in the last 20%. The negatives is that I often find that she writes characters to the detriment of forgetting to have enough narrative drive and plot to get me invested. I was honestly not very interested in this book for the first 80% and probably would have DNF'd it or put it down if I was reading a physical copy. But because I was listening to it as an audio book and I just didn't have anything else to listen to, I did continue on. I'm glad I did, because again, the ending really did pick up, but it definitely was not my favorite of hers. I've heard from other people that it does tend to be one of her less popular books, so I don't think my opinion is completely unpopular. I'm a little bit hit or miss with her as an author, so I just don't think her style of writing might be for me. I do tend to prefer horror that again is more narratively driven, and I just felt like this book didn't really go anywhere until the very end, which was a little bit frustrating. So not my personal favorite. I've read quite a few of her books and am just getting a sense that she just might not be an author for me, which is really hard for me to come to terms with because I love supporting female horror authors. And finally, I want to end by talking about a horror manga, and you can probably guess what author I'm going to talk about. That's right, I am still reading through Junji Ito's work. The book I want to talk about today is Tomie, which is about an absolutely beautiful woman that is so gorgeous that men just become obsessed with her. And through their obsession, they end up trying to murder her. And in accomplishing this, they find out that she is somehow immortal and basically keeps coming back to life. I understand that this is actually a collection of serials that the author did, so it's kind of a collection of short stories all about the same character that has been collected into one work. And the copy I read was a collection of 3 smaller volumes, and as a collected work, it's over 750 pages. And you know me in long horror books, I struggle with them. So my personal feelings were that there was a couple of really great stories in the collection. I think one's called Hair, one's called Boy, one's called Babysitter, and some of those I just loved. I thought they were phenomenal. They were exactly the reason I love his work so much. They were full of awesome body horror moments. They were bizarre and twisted in all the right ways. But there were a lot of other stories that just fell flat for me, and I started to feel like the collection was very repetitive and boring. And by the end, it really felt like a chore to read because it was just so long. And it was basically reading the same story of Tomie over and over again, because every time there was a man who was obsessed with her, he would murder her in some graphic way, and then she would come back to life. And it just was not my favorite of his work. So probably my least favorite of his books to date. that I've read. Not one I would personally recommend, which pains me because I still want to call him one of my favorite horror authors, but this one just really missed the mark for me. Again, there was a couple stories that were brilliant, but if I want to look at the percentage of the book that I enjoyed, it was a small slice of the entire collection, which is really unfortunate to say. So that's it for this round of recent horror reads. I'd love to know your thoughts down below. If you plan on picking up any of the books I mentioned, if you've already read them, share your thoughts, whether or not you agree with me. As well, I'd love to know if you have a recommendation what I should read next by Jonathan Janz. I definitely want to check out more of his work. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.